What?
We're studying hormones.
I have a joke about those.
Ha 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 ha. Lame.
I can imagine where it's going.
So this boy is retarded.
Fair.
Horrible.
Mr. Willis.
The endocrine. One day you're going to tell a joke.
Who did?
Book, right?
Who did?
Get a highlighter out.
What?
I'm sorry, I wasn't here 2 years ago.
No, you said
Talking back to you.
How could I steal it if I was just
Oh, do I don't think I shoot this. Oh, you put the highlighter.
This is pretty much the worst day of our day.
Highlighter.
I'm sorry, I saw your joke. It's the life of Brian.
That's retarded.
I'm not the Messiah. Only the true Messiah would deny it.
All right.
But I am the Messiah. He's the Messiah.
That's retarded.
Something Crowley would definitely know.
Yeah.
Do you have candy in your hat? The other day. No.
All right, listen up.
Actually, it's a beanie.
Oh, sorry.
My turn. This is this chapter is about hormones, which are molecules that are emitted by cells that cause action in other molecules that are far away. And the molecules that secrete the hormones are called glandular cells. And here it shows a bunch of cells, and the green dots there are hormones that they're releasing. And the way that hormones travel around is they get into the blood. These hormones are little molecules, and they get into the blood, and they travel all through the blood. The blood goes everywhere in the body, so they end up going everywhere in the body. And then they reach certain target cells. And the target cells will react to the hormones. Some of them, only certain cells react to certain hormones. So some cells will react to this hormone and some won't, depending on what the cells do. So it shows the hormone have no effect on some cells and some effect on the target cells. So this is kind of a way that the body communicates from region to region using the hormones. There's another way we already studied that communication exists. Do you know what system that is? Good. The nervous system. Neurons can send very fast signals from one place in the body to another. And those signals might get there in, a quarter of a second. Usually the hormonal signals move much slower because they're floating through the bloodstream, which even though the blood moves pretty fast, it can take a while. And another thing about hormones is they can last in the body for a long time. Once these molecules are squirted out, they'll stay in the blood for quite a while. Some of them come out of the blood and bind to the cells, but other molecules just stay in the bloodstream and can remain in the bloodstream for up to a month. And so this little signal, whatever you're communicating, the communication lasts for longer when you're using hormones. Your pituitary gland in your brain squirts out a little growth hormone every now and then. And that growth hormone circulates around and causes your cells to multiply and for you to grow. If your growth hormone isn't being secreted at all, if there's something wrong with your pituitary gland, or if the growth hormone is mutated so it's the wrong shape, you know what happens to a person with no growth hormone?
They don't grow.
And what are they called?
Midget.
They're called dwarves and midgets, that's right. They don't grow. Something was wrong with their growth hormone. So, that's kind of the idea here. We're communicating at a distance with chemicals. You have to memorize all these glands, and some of you already have. Most of you already have, I think. These are all forms of pituitary glands that will squirt out hormones. The hypothalamus is a part of the brain that sits right there. The hypothalamus squirts out hormones, and its hormones are used to control the pituitary gland that sits right below it. So the hypothalamus releases hormones, and its hormones are called releasing hormones. And it causes the pituitary gland to release its hormones. The pituitary gland is sometimes called the master gland of the body because there's about 7 or 8 different hormones that it releases. Growth hormone is one of them. We're going to study the other ones in the next few days. But the pituitary releases a bunch of hormones. A lot of the hormones the pituitary releases controls other glands, like the thyroid gland and the adrenal gland. Those are both controlled to some extent by the pituitary gland here. And then this part of the brain is called the pineal gland. It squirts out a single hormone called melatonin. You ever heard of that one? Mm-hmm. Melatonin controls when you get sleepy. And so the pineal gland, which is near the occipital lobe of the brain, what's the occipital lobe of the brain control? Vision. The pineal gland is sensitive to the vision, and the pineal gland knows when it's light or dark. And when it gets dark, the pineal gland starts squirting out its melatonin.
What does it do when it's like daytime, you're taking a nap or something?
Not all sleep is controlled completely by melatonin. That's a part of it. Sometimes you're still sleeping and fall asleep. I don't know if melatonin is controlled there somewhat, but probably when you turn your light out, even if it is in the day, the melatonin kicks in a little bit. And so it's easier to sleep with the lights off. And it's also why they say if you can't sleep at night, don't turn on the TV because that's light. And that doesn't help the melatonin be released. But my answer to that was, well, what else am I going to do? Can't read, that requires light. I just got to lay there. I'm not doing that. Listen to music. Listen to an audio book. Okay, well, enough of that. The thyroid gland sits around your esophagus there. It's right in your neck region. Kind of wraps around your trachea and your esophagus. And it's shaped like a butterfly there. And it squirts out hormones that are involved in your metabolism. Have you ever heard of somebody's metabolism? Mm-hmm. You girls might say, oh, she has a real high metabolism. She can eat anything she wants. I hate her.
Well,
that's your thyroid gland hormones. That controls your metabolism. People who don't secrete enough thyroid gland hormones end up really small too and have a disease called cretinism because they don't grow either because it requires metabolism to grow. Cretinism. You ever heard of cretinism? I'll show you some pictures. The parathyroid glands look like little dots, and they actually sit on the opposite side, on the back side of the thyroid gland. And they squirt out a hormone that helps control your calcium levels in your body. Talk more about the parathyroid glands later. And the thyroid gland also squirts out some calcium-controlling hormones. So the thyroid and parathyroid kind of work together to keep your calcium levels constant. You can't have too much calcium or too little calcium. So your calcium levels kind of fluctuate right around an average. This gland right here is called your thymus gland. It kind of sits over the top of your heart. And the thymus gland is where your immune cells mature. And those immune cells, after they're matured, the thymus gland actually starts to shrivel up and disappear. And by the time you get to as old as you guys are, your thymus gland is almost completely gone. Sorry. It's just a little piece of fat sitting over your heart now. Now it doesn't do anything. But kids, the thymus gland is real big and active. Have you ever heard of T cells?
Yep.
Helper T cells, some of you might have heard of. Those are cells that mature in the thymus gland there. And then sitting over the kidneys, now this is a kidney right here, but sitting on top of the kidney are the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands send out a hormone you've probably all heard of, adrenaline. You ever heard of that? Scientifically, it's called epinephrine. But when somebody scares you, it will squirt out its hormone, and you'll be, real active and real alert. It's part of your fight or flight mechanism. Yes?
Do they secrete cortisol as well?
Yeah, cortisol is released by the adrenal gland too. The adrenal gland actually has about 5 hormones it squirts out. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, and then that's the outside part of the adrenal gland does those. And then cortisol and glucocorticoids and mineral corticoids are released by the inside part of the adrenal gland. So we're going to talk about all those hormones. There's a lot of hormones you have to memorize for this chapter. I know you're looking forward to that. I'm going to make that an ID for y'all. Another ID. Where you have to read out the hormones and tell me what they do or something like that.
Yay.
The pancreas. The pancreas squirts out a couple hormones that y'all are familiar with. Have you ever heard of insulin?
Mm-hmm.
Insulin you've heard of. Glucagon maybe not. But insulin lowers your blood sugar. So right after you eat, right now, your pancreas is sensing a lot of sugar in your blood because you just ate sugary foods. And the pancreas will squirt out insulin. And then the sugar that's floating around in your blood will be stored in the liver. The liver reacts to insulin by grabbing sugar wherever it can find it and storing it inside the liver. So that's your pancreas. And then finally, the testes and ovaries. We're going to talk about those in chapter 18, if you can wait that long. And the hormones that they secrete. Actually, seniors might not be here for the sex talk.
Oh, man. Can we come back?
Penis, vagina. Yeah, I'll give you the days
All right.
that we talk about penis, vagina. You might. How many in here are not seniors? Okay, y'all will be around for the sex
It's okay, boy. You had that.
talk. Now, let's see how hormones work. There's 2 major types of hormones. The first type is called a steroid hormone. And a steroid hormone looks like this. It's got 4 fused rings. And it's based on the structure of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule that looks like a steroid hormone. But I'm talking about testosterone is a good example of a steroid hormone. Estrogen, the sex hormones. And it's showing it right here a lot bigger than it actually is. It's actually a pretty small molecule, and it's able to go right through the membrane because it's made of fat. Steroid hormones are based on fat molecules. And because they're soluble in fat, they dissolve in fat, it can go right through the cell membrane because the cell membrane is made of fat, phospholipid molecules. And the steroids go right through the membrane and through the cytoplasm of the cell and into the nucleus. And inside the nucleus, the steroid hormone will bond to a protein that's in the nucleus, and they'll form this complex here, and that will attach to the DNA of the cell and start a cell process called transcription. Do you remember transcription from regular biology? And transcription causes the DNA to be copied into a molecule called mRNA. And the mRNA leaves the nucleus and goes out here, binds to a ribosome, and a protein gets made. Now, if this particular cell was a muscle cell, the protein that gets made is called actin and myosin, and that'll make the muscle cell bigger. And so if you want big muscles, you can just take steroids.
How would we go
And
about
your
doing that?
cells will make more muscle. What's that?
If I was to be looking for some, where do you think I could find some?
We'll talk after school.
Okay.
Oh gosh, Mr. Lewis. Oh gee.
The problem is, when you take steroids like that, they don't only build muscle cells. Steroid hormones are used for communication to get your reproductive system working right. And if you interfere with that communication artificially, what's basically happening is the body is going, man, we got way too much testosterone in our system. Let's stop making so much testosterone. And your testes shrink.
You know, I'm
Real
good.
small. They stop making sperm because they figure there's too much testosterone in the body, and you're taking it artificially is why your body's thinking that. So people who take a lot of steroids have those problems. They can't have kids. They often can't have kids, and it also, the hormones affect your moods and your skin complexion and all sorts of things. So getting too much of anything is usually a bad thing. Here's how a steroid works. Kind of a boring video.
Steroid hormones are attached to a carrier protein and travel in the bloodstream to their target cells. The hormone dissociates from the carrier protein and passes through the cell membrane. It binds to a cytoplasmic receptor protein within the cell.
Some steroids do this, some don't.
This hormone receptor protein complex translocates to the nucleus and attaches to the chromatin at an acceptor site. This activates specific genes and begins the process of transcription. The newly transcribed messenger RNA leaves the nucleus and is translated into proteins. These proteins may be enzymes, for example, that will change the metabolism of the target cell in a specific way and produce the steroid hormone response. In review, steroid hormones reach their...
We don't want to review that lame video. Okay, there's another type of hormone out there, which we'll just call non-steroid. It's usually a peptide, which is a couple of amino acids hooked together. But there are other types of non-steroid hormones. But usually non-steroid hormones, they aren't made of fat, so they can't just go through the membrane. What they'll do is they'll bind to a receptor on the surface of the cell, and then once they've bound to that receptor, there's kind of a cascade of activity that goes on inside the cell. I'll tell you what it is just so you've seen it before in your life, but I'm not going to test you on the mechanisms that go on inside the cell. But this steroid hormone is received by this receptor protein, and a special protein called a G protein actually moves across and causes ATP. Have y'all heard of ATP before? You should have got this in regular bio. It's an energy molecule. It causes ATP to be converted into a new molecule called cyclic AMP. Do y'all know what ATP stands for?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Adenosine triphosphate. Cyclic AMP stands for adenosine monophosphate. And so anyway, they've taken off a couple phosphates here and made a new molecule that can start taking inactive proteins that are in the cytoplasm and activating them, and then those will cause some sort of different changes in the cell. The changes depend upon what kind of cell it is. So we call all this stuff that goes on inside the cell we call these molecules second messengers. The first messenger being the non-steroid hormone, and the second messenger being this cyclic AMP that does stuff inside the cell. So, the whole idea here is this first hormone can't get inside the cell and do anything. And that's how most hormones work. They bind to a receptor on the cell membrane. So I got some video footage of that. This is like made by a third grader, I think.
A circulating hormone secreted by an endocrine cell enters the bloodstream, which carries it to cells throughout the body. Only target cells with specific receptors react to the hormone.
See, they received the hormone. Not good. Hold on, I think I got a better one.
When a signal molecule, such as epinephrine, binds to a cell surface receptor protein, it activates...
Hold on, let me start over. Y'all are talking. Watch this. It's good stuff.
When a signal molecule, such as epinephrine, binds to a cell surface receptor protein, it activates a G protein on the inside of the cell. The G protein then stimulates adenylyl cyclase to produce large amounts of cyclic AMP from ATP within the cell. The cyclic AMP then binds to and activates a target protein, such as alpha kinase, which adds phosphates to specific proteins in the cell. The effect of this phosphorylation depends on the identity of the cell and the proteins that are phosphorylated.
So that was pretty technical, but so this molecule binds at the surface, and then something happens inside the cell, some change. That much?
Very simple version. I like third grade.
We're not going to watch that. Okay, so I want you to read through page 294, and let's do 11.3, and then we'll start talking about the pituitary gland tomorrow. Okay? You can turn the video on.